Did you have dinner yet?
He told me, I asked him, and he said, yeah, he'll just be from the street. I don't even know if we're going to be just
Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? Yeah, welcome to John Dutton Theater. Thank you so much for coming out to the Global Math Wars. My name is Andrew Fun. I'm one of the stars of Kim's Convenience on CBC. And most importantly, oh, thank you. I'm a kid from Calgary, and I'm so excited to be here tonight. Thank you. Oh, there's such a supportive audience, like full of teachers, right? That's so nice. Okay, so I want to get to know everyone in the crowd tonight. So on the count of 3, shout out what neighborhood you're coming from tonight, or what city or town you're representing tonight. 1, 2, 3. All right, I heard Bowness. They were very proud of Bowness. On the count of 3, your favorite potato chip flavor. All right, 1, 2, 3. You didn't say anything. It's because you didn't. Not potato chips? Chocolate bar. No, you're staying. You're.
Never guess.
I'll never guess. So it's not chips or chocolate. It's just like vegetables.
Yeah,
stay away from vegetables. What do you eat? And on the count of 3, on the count of 3, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? 1, 2, 3. What was yours? Animals? That's just a generic superpower? Like animal powers. And you could pick any of the animal. It's like an old Fisher-Price thing, and you pick the animal, and you pull it, and it spins, and that's your power. Someone take that, write a children's book, it's yours. All right, I want to get the crowd moving a little bit here. You got settled in, I'm going to get you moving a little bit. So here's what I want. There's a lot of people who came in groups, all right, duos, trios on their own. I want you to stand up on the count of 3, and I want you to introduce yourself to 3 people you don't know, okay? It requires, yeah, some people are like, oh, we gotta stand up. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, go ahead. Everyone, come back. Look at the participation, this was great. I want all my audiences to be rooms full of teachers. Just listen to instruction really well. That was very nice. All right, so thank you so much for coming out to Global Math Wars. I know what you're thinking. Who better to moderate a math-themed event than someone who failed math every year of high school, twice in grade 12, right? So, but I actually think that's, I'm like one of the reasons why we're doing stuff like this, because math is changing, all right? The way we teach math grades is changing, and straight up math is hard. Can we all agree math is hard, kids? Math is hard? I gotta read the room better, right? Should've, wait, math is easy with the right teaching. Math is easy once you figure it out, right? No? Math is good. Read the room, 3rd time's a charm, very nice. But I think tonight we're gonna have a really respectful discussion around the current state of math. So can we agree upon that right now? We're gonna have a respectful discussion on the state of math. But first, I want to give props and a thank you to the math practice facilitators for demonstrating the engaging learning activities that teachers are using in classrooms today. So, they were Tracy Rand, Shay Frisbee, Jen Phelps, Nick Moskaluk, Michael Croker, Jessica Govet, Katie Lemke, and Svetlana Pavlova. Can we give them a round of applause? That's very nice. All right, so you're noticing we got the cameras going on here. We are streaming this on Facebook and on YouTube. Is that correct?
Just YouTube.
Just YouTube, not Facebook? We just privacy concerns. Got it. All right. Just dropped it last minute. All right, so we're streaming this on YouTube right now. So if you are at home watching this, all right, you can ask questions on the comment bar, okay? So you put that there. Just a disclosure as well, we are recording this. So if you have any privacy concerns, there is information for the privacy officer afterwards. But we want to include the audience here. So there will be an opportunity for an audience Q&A. So I want everyone to say hi to Dan over there. Look at Dan, look at him. He's so tall, he just blends into the shadows up top. All right, Dan's got these white pieces of paper and pen. So throughout the evening, if you want a question to be asked during the Q&A, you can flag him down starting now to get your question in. So he's gonna be handing out pieces of paper for you to put questions on at any point. You can even start that now. And anyone online, you can put it in the comments bar right there. All right, so also before we get started, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the Calgary Public Teachers, aka Alberta Teachers Association, Local 38, and their Strategic Planning and Research Committee for hosting tonight, and the Alberta Teachers Association for co-sponsoring. So we give them a big round of applause. So here's how tonight's gonna work, all right? We're gonna introduce three amazing panelists. They're gonna come out and give a brief statement on the current state of math instruction and results. Afterwards, we're gonna have a short discussion, and then we're gonna go into the Q&A, and as I said, the questions can be filled out on the white pieces of paper. Are there any questions before we start? That's great. Okay, so I'm noticing there's also a lot of kids in the room right now. So make some noise if you're like under the age of 15. Yes, yes. Okay. I just want to give you no, it's okay. They make all the noise. Do that again. Hey kids, make some noise. I am sorry. I'm sorry for what just happened right there. But you can keep doing that. Whatever you want to do. That's allowed, okay? As a father, I should know better to give this permission. Kids, all right, and to parents as well. This is a discussion about math, okay? So, kids in the room, you might get antsy, okay? You might get a little bored. Some kids brought this string thing, all right? But parents and kids, if you want, you can feel free, if the kids get bored, to let them leave. There is a library back there, all right? And like an open kids, what's that? It's locked up? I should have definitely checked that information before I released it. I feel like that's something I should have looked at. It's locked? It's closed? All right, so parents, kids, there's a lobby area right out there. It's not much more fun than it's gonna be in here, but you're welcome to go out there. And I truly believe like we learn in different ways. So to the kids in the room and to the adults, if you want to get up and you want to walk around a little bit, or you want to make this noise, yep, perfect. You can do that whenever you want, respectfully. All right. But if you need to walk around and move, that's encouraged. Is everyone ready to do this? You guys ready to meet your panelists? First up, she is the acting superintendent for learning at the Calgary Board of Education and a sessional instructor at the University of Calgary. Her areas of responsibility at the CBE include instructional and programming supports, curriculum. Oh, you're just coming out. Oh. So we just like, no, he's gonna keep talking, I'm gonna come on out. I usually like to hype the person up. You're bringing, no, go back. What are you doing? Don't know. She's a loose cannon, all right? Go back. In sports, they like announce the team and then they come out, all right? But no, you intimidate me very much, so I don't want to mess with you at all. But I was midway through it, but okay, great. All right, we got it. It's totally rehearsed. All right, cool. Early learning, exceptional needs education, Aboriginal education, and student assessment. She recently spearheaded the CBE's math strategy and leads a team of math coaches whose aim is to offer development to teachers throughout Calgary's public schools in their area of math education. Please give a big warm welcome to Dr. Rana Mosher. I've literally emceed like hundreds of events, and no one's ever just like walked out. They're like, all right, let's just do one thing. That was a delight. Thank you so much. All right, up next. He is an associate professor with a joint appointment in educational policy and educational inquiry at Indiana University. His research focuses on educational policy and educational measurement with specific emphasis on international large-scale assessment and program evaluation. There's a lot of big words right there. He has collaborated with and consulted for national and international organizations, including the U.S. State Department and UNESCO. He's published numerous peer reviews, sits on the board for several academic journals. Straight up, this dude knows math. Please welcome Dr. David Rutkowski. David, fun fact, you're a vegetarian, correct? Yeah, he's a vegetarian. We learned that earlier today. All right, she is the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Alberta. Throughout her career, her research has focused on the mathematical understanding of children. For almost a decade, she has been particularly interested in the reasoning of young children from preschool to grade 2, and over the past several years, she has continued to explore the children's spatial reasoning and mathematical generalizations through patterning and algebraic contexts. This research has led to key insights into children's early mathematical understanding and has implications for teaching and curriculum in early patterning and algebraic thinking. Yo, I feel so much smarter for just reading that right now. That was amazing. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Lynn McGarvey. I said I would feel smarter just like reading out your bio. That was spectacular. You can turn on your microphones right now. There's a button at the bottom. Yeah, there's a blue button. Yeah. There it is. Yeah, sometimes you gotta touch your microphone. So, yeah, everyone say hi. Speak into it. Yeah, there. We want to hear your voice, David. Speak into it. Yeah.
I just did.
Yeah, good. Lynn? Oh, let me help you out. There you go. There, you got it. There you go.
Hello.
Hello. Good. Your mic works. You have this look like I don't even want to ask.
I was like waiting for instructions.
No. Yours is good to go. All right. So, how's everyone doing tonight?
Great.
Great. Good. All right. So, at the beginning of tonight's session, we're going to open up the floor for each of our amazing panelists. You're going to get 10 minutes or less to share your thoughts on this next question I'm going to provide. Okay. So, there have been several media reports about Calgary students' math scores over the last year, with many sounding the alarm over declining results. These reports are very similar to what we see on a recurring basis across the province and Canada. Indeed, it seems declining math results is a recurring media story across the globe. What's your perspective on this? Is there a math crisis? Okay, so, David, we'll turn the floor to you to go first.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming out. Having me sit down like this is like caging up an orangutan. So, I mean,
you're welcome to stand as well.
Yeah. Well, then I'll fall off the stage.
This whole
so.
area is
I'll try sitting. Let's see how this goes. All right. I'm here to talk about large-scale assessment, and I think some of this, of what you're probably hearing, is coming from these big tests that you hear about. So I'm just going to really briefly. I'm going to try to do it in less than 10 minutes, so not to bore you. I fall asleep at some of my presentations. So we're going to talk about two big international assessments. One's called PISA and one's called TIMSS. And there's a little bit difference in those assessments. And I have a handout that I kind of made for you. And hopefully you guys all picked one up. And we could reference this, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. And you'll see one with the TIMSS on it, 4th grade, and PISA, 8th grade. But before I start, we're going to talk about this perceived math crisis. But I consult with governments around the world. This is one of the things I do. And I have to tell you, if most governments had the numbers that you guys have on these assessments, they would just drop the mic and leave. Like, that would just be amazing. So that we have so many interested people here about this. I think speaks to the dedication and thought that you in Alberta really care about education and care about the math and what's happening in math. And speaking to that, just in general, does anyone know how you guys do in science? Yeah. You rock it. I mean, you can't do any better in science. Singapore does a little better, but really you're at the top of the world on these assessments in science. So it doesn't seem like there's a teaching problem, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So math scores. All right, I told you there's two types of assessments. The TIMSS assessment is a grade-based assessment. And what I mean is that it actually assesses at a certain grade all around the country. In TIMSS, it does 4th and 8th grade. Alberta only takes the 4th grade assessment. And what you see on the, if you look on your sheets right there, what you'll see is Alberta's score in 1995. And that was the first year we did modern day international assessments. And you see the score was 523, which ranked you fairly high in the world. That was quite a good score. And now we fast forward to 2015, and we see 484. It's a drop. It's a drop any way we look at it. There's no way to get around that this not being a drop. So there seems to be something going on there. But one test is one test, right? And there's a lot of problems with the test. TIMSS measures an international curriculum. So all these countries that take the test get together and say, this is what we generally teach in school, and this is what we're going to measure with this assessment. And so it's a curriculum-based test and an grade-based test. Now let's flip over to PISA. And I think a lot of people in the room have heard of PISA. PISA is the, I like to say the big bad economic organization puts together an assessment, where the IEA is a nice little non-governmental education-based organization. The OECD, who many of you know, is an economic organization, and they decided to make an assessment on what they believe 15-year-olds, now that's going to be a little bit different than a grade-based assessment, 15-year-olds need to know to operate in a modern economy, a free market economy. So that's the idea. So it's no longer based on what schools are supposed to be teaching, it's based on what the OECD believes 15-year-olds should know. In the country where I'm from, the United States, that means we take 15-year-olds from 5 different grades when we get that assessment. That's who you're comparing to. Now, if we look at what happened in Canada, when we look at the 15-year-olds that they were tested, the small table will show you the difference in years. PISA started in 2000, but 2003 is really the first time we had a good math framework. So that's the basis that we're going to use, and we're going to compare to that. And what you had in 2003 is Alberta rocked it. That was a really great score of 549. It was one of the top in the world. I know we have some Finnish colleagues over here, but they did better than you, Finland. I'm sorry. Everyone was going to Finland to see what the Finnish miracle was. No one was coming to Alberta to see what the Alberta miracle was. But what happened was, we fast forward to 2015, and we see, if you follow those numbers, you start to see a drop, and you see a steady drop. What concerns me is that you see a steady drop on both assessments. So something seems to be happening. And normally we could say, okay, it's an assessment problem, and maybe kids aren't motivated to take the assessment. But one of the strange things is you're top in the world in science. So those same kids are taking that same assessment in math and science. So there seems to be something going on. Now there could be a lot of explanations for this. First of all, you might not be teaching what PISA is supposed to be, is assessing. That's a real big possibility. And from what I know, your government has not done an alignment study between PISA and your curriculum. And until you know that, it's really hard to be held accountable for that. And second of all, is that PISA doesn't, because it could take from different grades, PISA doesn't necessarily measure what the teachers are expected to do, right? So there's a lot of big holes that we see in these PISA assessments. So we look, if we want to think, and I'm going to go over to the math experts here and that they could dig into this a little bit. I'm not going to tell you about your own curriculum. But if we think about these assessments kind of as a thermometer, these assessments are good for telling us that there might be a problem or something might be wrong. It might be the sniffles, or it might be really dire. You might have cancer. But what these assessments don't do is they don't tell you the causal link of what's actually happening. And that's why we have these experts in the room to tell us, if there is something happening, what could possibly be going on. So, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Just to go back to the question here. That was your perspective. Is there a math crisis?
This is your province. I think you need, and I'm not really trying to punt here.
Yeah.
But this is really a local question. You need to decide if there's a math crisis. I can tell you about the test. I can tell you what's on the test. And I can tell you that there's some criticisms I have of both the tests, but they're not bad tests. And that we see this declines happening, I would look into it.
You would look into it.
If you want to call it a crisis, or if you think it's a crisis, you're still above average.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is really a little.
Yeah, C's get degrees. Yeah, okay, good. I felt like I was the Senate there, like I was grilling someone. Yes or no? Is there a crisis? Thank you so much, David. That was really great. Rana.
Okay, so I guess I'm local. So I'll try to pick up on this in a little bit different way. I think David, you really gave us some important information there, and I think it's important to think about that idea that lots of other people in the world would like to have the scores that Alberta has, but I'll go even more local to Calgary, and I am going to take that crisis word. So I think if some of the media reports that you read, it's a little bit like a penny narrative going on. There's a sense of impending doom and imminent catastrophe that kind of gets spun out. So in that sense of the word crisis, I'd say no. I don't think that the mathematical sky is falling. I don't. But I don't think that we're talking about nothing either. So there's scores that say there's something to pay attention to. So in the Calgary Board of Education, we're pretty transparent about our scores. So I'll just remind you a couple of them in case you're not focused on that.
We can't really hear you very well, and we're only in the third row.
I think just bring it closer to the mic. Bring it closer.
Okay, so I'll just kind of take you to some of the scores for the CBE. So on provincial achievement tests in grade 6, just thinking about the writers, we have 78% of grade 6 students meet the acceptable standard on that PT. Grade 9, it's lower. I think it's about 71%. On our report cards, students look much more successful. It's like around 91% of them are meeting expectations from the program of studies according to their teachers. So, and what concerns us, I think, about the provincial achievement test scores is that they're not getting better. So usually when a new program of studies is introduced, it takes a few years, so there's usually a decline from the previous results when you introduce a new program of studies. And usually after kind of 3, 4, 5 years, things start to strengthen, and that's not happening. We're not seeing the strengthening in the results. And so we have pretty awesome teachers here locally, and we have some really we have some great kids and some families who really care about this. So when that many good things are coming together, it is kind of concerning that those results aren't showing everything that we think they should. I think there's something to talk about, and I guess that's the sense of the word crisis I actually think we can pay attention to. So Greek etymology for crisis is actually a moment of decision making. There's actually something to deliberate about. There's something to pay attention to. There's something to question. You can't kind of just carry on and not think about it. You actually have to pause. So I agree. The fact that we're having this conversation is really, really important. And as a community, there's lots of things that we need to think about in terms of math. We need to think about the ways that we're assessing it. We need to think about our program of studies. The new program of studies that was introduced a few years ago set out a totally different image of mathematics for teachers and students. And then it's been bumped around a little bit. And then the provincial achievement tests have been bumped around a little bit in the last couple of years. So trying to find the wisdom in all of those pieces of information is work, and it's work that we're trying to take up. So I think that's important. Another piece of that idea of crisis in the Greek sense is that there's a little bit of suspension. So 2 ways to think about that too, is that you have to kind of suspend the things you take for granted. And yet there's a sense of suspense too, because you can go, what are we going to do? How are we going to figure this out? And how are we going to move forward? And I actually am thrilled that we're talking about it, because there's something that we need to do. And I think there's a sense of identity crisis almost in this. And so Andrew, kind of, forgive me, I'm going to play off you a little bit. And when you were talking in your introduction about having not done well in math and
yeah, and I got a degree in economics. That's gonna blow your mind. How did that happen?
And then people kind of laugh when people talk about not doing well in math. People kind of laugh, and somehow or another there's this social acceptability about not doing well in math, and we can't continue that way. We actually need every single person, every student, every teacher to do well and to be proud.
I think the thing for me that I've taken away in my conversations with Daniel and his crew here is that the way math has been taught in schools has changed. You know, from I graduated in a year I don't want to say, but from that time till now it's changed, right? So I look for someone like me. I have a degree in economics because maybe the way I was learning math in high school wasn't a fit for me as a student, right? And then getting to university, like, oh, what? Math is dope. I figured it out, right? And so, and I took like a night course at university because my math grades weren't good enough to take Math 249. So if you went to UFC, you know Math 249. You know what I'm talking about. My math grades weren't good enough, and so I took this night course after like university, and there was this teacher. And it was like Dangerous Minds. He had like 8 kids who were all like struggling in math, and he taught it to us. So I think it's the way we teach it. But kind of going back to my initial question here. So for you, it's the word crisis. It's not a crisis in that word right now, but there's something to look at, is what you've pointed out in your words.
Yeah, I think the data we have needs to teach us something, but we have to question it. We can't just take it literally. We can't be thin in our interpretation of the information we have. So data isn't the answer, it's not the end of the story. It needs to be the beginning of a whole bunch of questions, and we need to ask them together.
That's great. All right, then I'm going to throw it over to you.
All right, well, thank you. Can I just find out who's in the audience? How many teachers are out there? Lots of you. How many of you are parents? How many of you are in STEM professions? A few of you engineers. Okay, thank you very much.
And how many people just showed up and you're at the wrong event, but you're not really sure like how to leave? That guy's like, I thought it was like 8:15. I'm like, what time? What's going on? Go on.
Well, David talked about the 2012 PISA exams, and at that time, there was a perceived crisis. So the headlines at that time read, Canada's fall in math education ranking sets off alarm bells, the damaging legacy of discovery learning, and parents and teachers demanding a return to basic skills. And since that time, 2013 onward, Canada, and particularly Alberta, has been under fire, in crisis over mathematics education. So I've been asked to speak about whether or not there is a crisis, fact or fiction, and what we might do about it. And I thought it might be worthwhile saying that anytime there is a change in math, whether it's math teaching or math curriculum, it often leads to a crisis, and certainly becomes a media event of one sort or another. So I'm going to read you a couple of clips from articles. So this first one. Methods of teaching arithmetic have been revolutionized. Some years ago, mental arithmetic was a feature of all teaching in schools. Today, this form of instruction is often never even heard of. It's been done away with. One reason is that mental arithmetic is now considered to be utterly uninteresting. That's from the New York Times in 1902. So it's been a long time since we've been having the same arguments, and efforts to revolutionize mathematics teaching have been going on for 100 years, and it always seems to meet resistance of one sort or another. In the 1930s and 40s, there was some really interesting work. That's when psychology started up. There was an interesting work by William Brownell, who was an educational psychologist. And sort of for the first time, he thought he should listen to children on how they are solving computation problems. So if it was, the example he gave is 3 plus 4, and children said, well, I know 3 plus 3 is 6, and 1 more is 7. So he listened, and then they did drill. So they did tons and tons of drill afterwards. And what they found was, as soon as they started drill, and this was with grade 2, grade 3 students, many of those students didn't have that memorized response. What they did was they got faster at whatever method they were using. So if they were counting on their fingers, 8 plus 5, they just got really fast at counting on their fingers, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And doing early drill actually prevented students from remembering their basic facts. So that was in the 1930s and 40s. So for those of you that are really interested in Alberta curriculum, if we go back to 1947, Alberta Program of Studies for Elementary School, it says, and based on some of those studies, many of the chronic difficulties of arithmetic learning in elementary schools have their origins in the early arithmetical experiences that tend to emphasize wholesale memorization rather than meaningful understanding of the number system. 1947. Wow. Okay, so it's interesting, we continue to have the same arguments for 70 years. And I can go on. 1967, Globe and Mail. New math is criticized as an attempt to avoid the basics of arithmetic. The new math is essentially a new method of teaching. The idea is to teach students to think and reason their way through instead of relying on memorizing or rules and routines. The response from a mathematician at that time says, my personal opinion is that a lot of it is fraudulent. There's an amount of drill that elementary mathematics needs to have, like the times tables. So that's 1967, 50 years ago. 1976, not any different in the media. The new math has been a wipeout, mainly because teachers don't understand it and the textbooks they use are a ripoff. Heard that recently too. In fact, overall mathematics picture in Canada at present contains so much distress, unease, and confusion that energetic steps must be initiated immediately to improve the situation. Globe and Mail, that was 1976. And it just continues over and over again, decade after decade. So, and I could bring up similar media reports for every decade for 100 years. So the issue then, as it is today, is there's an assumption that we know what the cause is of poor performance in math, and we know what the cure is, that it's go back and memorize your basic facts. But 100 years tells us that is not helping. That's not making a difference. I'm tired of having the argument of, let's go back and just do the memorization of basic facts again. The crisis that I see that is not talked about, and we have decades of evidence for it, is between grade 6 and grade 9, in our provincial achievement tests, our students fall off a cliff. And you can hear anecdotally from adults, I did great in elementary school, I loved it, I was really good, and then I hit junior high, and it went all downhill from there. So what is happening between grade 6 and grade 9? And that is happening now. It was happening in the 2000s, in the 1990s, and whenever the PAT started, we see that huge drop-off between grade 6 and grade 9. So that's the crisis that I see, and it's a crisis we're not addressing. we keep talking about number as being the foundation, and that's what we really should be working on, is more on number. But if you look at our results on the PISA, if you look at our results on the Provincial Achievement Tests, the area that our students are not doing well in is geometry. And so why isn't there people saying, we need more geometry, we need to be doing a better job? And I was a junior high school teacher. You spend most of your time on algebra, or in elementary you do it in number, and then you do geometry fun stuff towards the end of the year to try and cram it in before, just to get it done. You spend most of your time doing number. But geometry is really a place that we need to spend some more time. And some of the recent research really shows that geometry, spatial reasoning in particular, is really important. It's found to be one of the most central aspects to performance in most of the STEM professions. So spatial reasoning, so these are things like, if you can read a map, not put it into Google, you actually take out a map and you know where you are and you can read it. Being able to put together furniture from IKEA, being able to read those instructions, or 2D instructions, and it turns into a 3D object. If you can do origami and read those instructions and fold something up that actually looks like a dragon at the end. And also the most important one is if you can play the first-person shooter video games and beat your children at them. So because you're moving through a three-dimensional space and know where you are. So it is those spatial reasoning skills that are some of the best predictors of how well students can do in mathematics in elementary school. It is some of the best predictors of performance in engineering, and a lot of the recent research for freshman engineers, they might have really strong algebra skills, but if their spatial reasoning skills are low, their performance in engineering is low. So some of the recent research is doing intervention studies with freshman engineers to develop their spatial reasoning. And that has improved their skills, not only in some of the CAD drawing activities, but in all of the STEM activities. So from my perspective, I'm tired of hearing about a lack of basic facts. I know we can do better there, but that is not the source of the crisis. That's just far too simplistic, and we have 100 years saying that it is too simplistic. It also doesn't address the performance that I see as the crisis, is the drop-off between grade 6 and grade 9.
Thank you. Man, so much relatability in yours. IKEA furniture, video games, origami. Very nice. So, for you, with that question, is there a math crisis? It sounds like you're saying there's a crisis in certain areas, like geometry, and then definitely from grade 6 to 9.
Yes.
Yes, yes, finally an answer! Yes! Finally, very nice.
It's the crisis we're not talking about.
Oh, yes. Yo, the crisis we're not talking about? Look at these headlines! Alright, so we're gonna do, I got a couple of questions. We're gonna do like just a discussion between the group here. Feel free to jump in at any point, but once again, I'm gonna remind everyone in the audience, we want to do an audience Q&A. If you have a question, just flag down Daniel. We'll do it right now. Does anybody have a question they want to get on a piece of paper right now? Yeah, bring it down. Bring it on down. There's right here, there. There, and then over there as well. Over here in the front, yeah. Good. And I just want to make sure everyone can hear us okay? Everyone can hear us right? Everybody? Great. Great. And then kid in the second row, how do you feel right now? How's she feeling? How you feeling? You're feeling, you're engaged right now. You're getting noisy, like you're into this right now. Yeah. Well, I'm going to yell at me very soon, I'm not sure. Okay. Great. So I have two questions as a launching point right now. I'll start with the first one, and you can jump in at any point. Regardless of whether or not you agree that a math crisis exists, the media reports that there is tremendous public pressure to do something about student math scores. Should something be done, and if so, what? And it sounds like some of you have touched on it, but maybe in a bit more detail. So, should something be done, And if so, what? I feel like David won't answer because this isn't like you don't want to roll in and tell us what to do. Like, you're an observer. So, but you feel free to answer maybe what you would do if you were in this city.
Let's let the experts.
Oh, deferring, it's so good.
See, I'm good at this.
You're good at this.
So the idea of action is important, right? The idea of being curious and working your way through things, that's what we need to do. So in the Calgary Board of Education, we are trying to do things. I don't think that what we're trying to do though is necessarily tackle the scores. We're trying to work on the teaching and learning. So the scores are going to have to show the teaching and learning. We can't make individual scores our outcomes. Our outcomes are defined through the program of studies, and that's what we work on. So in our math strategy, we are trying to take on the idea of everybody feeling successful with mathematics. So students actually recognizing their mathematical thinking, having positive cultures about mathematics. That's actually been one of the most exciting things I think that's happened this year for us, is that you can't go anywhere in the CBE right now without hearing people talking about math. So that's a pretty exciting thing. We have set some priorities around that grade 5 to 9 group. We're working on number and we're working on shape and space, because we do recognize our data is very much like the provincial data, and that's where there's some really good work to do. We've put tons of effort into building capacity for our staff, because their mathematical learning and their pedagogical learning around mathematics, that's the leverage point for helping our students. So that's our focus area. We got lots of publicity about our strategy, and I don't think it's perfect, but I do feel really good about that we're trying things and we're trying to pay attention to them as we go forward, connecting to research, connecting to others, and we're excited to see the changes we can make.
That's a great answer. And I think you said the word perfect, and I don't think anything is ever really perfect, right? It's a trial and error. We try something out and we see what happens with it, but that is what's currently happening right now. That's what we're currently doing. David, I'll throw it back to you. Hearing what you just heard, is that the right approach? Is that stuff that you would be doing if you were in this city? I will keep bringing it back until you give us an answer.
Len, what do you think, Len? I think I'll go back to something you said when you were going through all of those quotes, because I think it means something. I know the Teachers Association does a lot of great work internationally, and the Teacher Association has some research projects where they go to Finland and other countries to see what's actually going on. And I think that's really interesting work that should keep going. But one of the things about going back to the basics, that's just silly. It really is. And I don't mean to insult anybody that really believes that this should happen. Of course you need to know your times tables. I teach statistics. Everyone in my statistics class needs to know their times tables. I mean, but that's going to happen. This is really important stuff. And I'll take Russia, for example. Russia does really well on the curriculum-based test I talked about. And one of the reasons they do really well is the old Soviet way of rote memorization. You really memorize your Russian curriculum. I mean, and it's really shoved in a certain way down your throat.
Because you have to, it's Russian.
Yeah, and it's horrible when I give statistical workshops in the Soviet region, because they just nail you on the statistics. I mean, they're really, really good. So it's my nightmare every time I do it. But they don't do so well on PISA.
What back to basics is not what should be done, and that what is happening now in regards to the way we're thinking and how we're approaching it is more the direction you would want to go.
There's not a lot of evidence that going back to the basics is going to get you where I think the headlines want you to go. Now, if you choose that that's where you want to go, that's another discussion, but it's not going to get you where I think the people that are saying they want to go back to the basics.
So you're outlining a math map, right? And to get to the place that we want to go, it's not back to basics. It's wherever this is right now. Got it. Okay, Lynn.
Well, just to continue on from that, if you looked at the PISA results, one of the places that we lost performance is in the high end. So those are the top performers in 2003. We had a lot of top performers, but that top group has shrunk. So that means that our students perhaps need more complex problem solving, need more opportunities for that. So that, again, that's sort of that counter back to the basics. That is not going to help us improve that top end of students. So that's what I would like us to continue to strive for, is make sure we continue to do complex problem solving in our classes.
So that's what you would do. Great, very nice. Short, concise answer. That's so good. All right. Is based on what you've heard, anyone else? Is there anything else anyone wants to add regarding this here?
I have a little thing. So sometimes I think it's important to remember that those ideas aren't always contradictory either. I think number facts are important. I think it's about how you build that understanding and how you develop that recall. I read this lovely article about teaching basic facts, basically, as functions. And it was a really exciting way to do it, because that way you were building both the sense of the number fact and their recall, but you were actually doing it through a complex problem-solving way. So I think in terms of doing things, we have to be willing to think differently, and I think we have to be brave to try some new ways of doing things that actually get us to some very good places if we have the courage and the perseverance to work through them.
That's great, thank you. We have another question, and we'll get to the audience Q&A questions. And Dan, are you circulating around? Great, we have a pile right there, so feel free to bring that up, and we'll get to that for the next one. So right now, students, and we have discussed this right now a little bit. Right now, students in grades 6 and 9 take standardized provincial achievement tests and diploma exams in grade 12 math. The Alberta government also encourages school boards to participate in international tests such as PISA and TALIS. What is the impact of these tests? Lynn, we'll start with you. David, I keep putting him in the hot seat. I don't want to do that to you. Lynn, we'll let you go first.
The impact of the test is, the tests themselves don't impact us. It's our interpretation of what is happening. So I think there's a huge amount of money that goes into provincial achievement tests and the international tests as well. But we can't just stop by saying, oh no, our ranking fell, or oh no, we lost a couple of percentage points on provincial achievement tests. Somebody once told me, you can't make a pig fatter by weighing it more often. And so I don't think we need to constantly be testing our children to get them fatter. We need to make sure that we take the time to give children lots of opportunities, our youth lots of opportunities to learn and think and reason mathematically in their classes.
So we need to feed them, is what you're saying. Great.
Thank you.
It was there. It was like right that they would like take the pull. You're like, you didn't go for it. It's right there. Take it. David.
Okay, so you mentioned TALIS. We just for clarification, TALIS isn't a test, it's a survey. And the reason I want to clarify that is because I think in the media you're going to see that you're going to take the TALIS. TALIS is a survey of teachers, and it's a survey that goes all, around the world. But going back to the tests, yeah, I think, like you said, I think you're right. It's the interpretation of the test. In the United States, we ignore international tests. I mean, they're just completely ignored. Nobody cares. I was with the minister of, well, we have other things to care about right now. There's probably a tweet that right now about something that I'm missing. Let me get on my phone. No, we normally just don't care. It's not because, well, it probably is because we don't care about much, but because we're such a diverse and big country, 320 million people. This test, what are we going to compare ourselves to? Iceland, 300,000 people? It's just a ridiculous comparison. But it's that interpretation, right? And I think going back to what interpretations are valid about making about the test, and this is going to be my plug to teachers. You need to become assessment literate, because there's no way that you're going to fight back against any misinterpretation unless you understand what the assessment is about and what the assessment is doing. For example, PISA is not aligned to your curriculum. Why are you being held accountable to PISA? That doesn't make any sense.
You got applause. Look at that.
See, make me say something.
Make you say something. Okay, great.
Okay. So I don't know that we are accountable to PISA. I've never felt any accountability to that. So I think that assessment literacy piece is huge. So TIMS, I think, is a really interesting test because so much of the information that's gathered in TIMS isn't made part of the public discourse, and it's not actually presented as part of the interpretation of the information. So if you don't know, one of the sets of questions that's included in TIMS is for teachers who actually ask how many of these particular topics that are being tested have you actually taught? And Quebec has about 80% of the topics have been taught by the time that the students are tested. Alberta is much lower than that, sometimes as low as 40%. So you have to actually pay attention to that. So that information then isn't used to interpret the rankings. The rankings will be presented as though everybody was equal. So I think that's another thing to know. There's so much more information in those reports than we ever get to look at. And Lynn reminded us that about the difference between the complex thinking and the simple thinking. So PISA in Alberta, we do actually really, really well on the low complexity questions. So it's the problem solving where we actually see our opportunities to grow. So digging into those things to learn about them is important. And one thing I feel impacted by with PISA, and I hope all of you know this, is that Canada and Alberta are not just high performers on that test, we have high equity ratings. And I think that's something to be incredibly proud of in this very diverse country and in the province, that everybody has as much opportunity to be successful on those and to show that learning as other people. So I have actually ended up feeling quite proud of those results.
All right, great. Thank you for your responses. I have a stack of questions here, and I want to get to them. So we're just going to go through some of these questions from the audience now. And Dan, I think there are a few more circulating. And if you get one, or you have a question that's based out of what you hear from here, feel free to flag Dan. Dan will get some piece of paper to you. So here's the first one from Sarah. What information do we have about the correlation between declining math scores and changes in other factors? Examples: classroom funding, early childhood education, class sizes, or even hours of physical education. Anyone can take this at any point.
I don't know if we have those correlations, but that list shows you how complex it is. We can't just fix one thing and performance is going to improve. Schools are complex, and that's just the start of a list.
I think one of the problems too of using international assessment, first of all, as we all remember, there's a lot of math teachers here, so you'll remember correlation's not causation, so we always have to be really, really concerned with that. But for example, class size. When you use international assessment, it's really hard to talk about class size, because a lot of the Asian economies that do extremely well in these assessments just have huge classes. So then if you look at the correlation to compare across countries, it's really hard. But what you could do is, if you saw these changes in Alberta now over 15 years, and that there's some changes, that would be research. And I don't know of research on that.
So we don't have the information, but there is an opportunity for research on that, is what you're saying.
It seems like it.
Yeah. This has been discussed a little bit here. To what extent are the large-scale exam formats creating a disconnect between the breadth of what students are expected to know and do? Might the test formats be inadvertently narrowing the focus of teaching and learning at the expense of deep understanding?
Yes.
I think you said it earlier, right? Yeah. Okay, great. How do we reconcile things like problem-based learning, deep thinking, multiple entry points, and personalized math learning with packed questions? How do we better test understanding?
We're getting better. And this is one of the problems with assessment. And I keep trying to tell people this, but they don't believe me. We're not that good at it yet. And so it's getting better, but we can't do too many things on one assessment. And this is one of the issues that we really struggle with in psychometrics, the crazy people that actually make these tests, is we're good at measuring one thing for an average population. When we get down to the ends of the population, or we try to add a lot of things, especially complex problem solving and stuff like this, we're just not that good at measuring those things yet. And I think it will be 20 years until we're pretty accurate at really trying to measure those things.
Anything you want to add? Nope. This is for Rana. Grade 6 math provincial achievement tests have steadily increased in difficulty from 1992 to 2018. How valid, underlined, can results be when the questions my grade 6 students answer today are significantly more difficult than those that were required to answer 26 years ago? Exclamation point, name, teacher who loves math. I was just trying to convey, I felt like your like passion in what you were saying. So whoever that was, I hope it did it properly, but it's for you.
Can I read?
And I think it's a valid question. It sounds like someone who has been in the math game for a long time. So leave it over to you.
So between 1992, that's what I needed to check was the year, and 2018, there's been a couple of different programs of studies, right? So, I think the expectations for students and for teachers around math are increasing. I think it is. So sometimes I'll use myself as a poor example. So when I was in university studying for a calculus exam with a friend, and exams in the morning, it's actually the wee hours of the morning now, let's be honest. And now don't judge me too harshly, because remember I'm 17 in this story, okay? It's not me today. And I finally, my friend is like working really hard and he's asking all these questions, and I finally turned to him and I said, would you stop trying to understand it and just learn how to do it? So we wrote that exam. I can't remember what I got. So 75 or 80% or something. He got 10%. And I remember that because I'd say at the end of it, I didn't really understand anything, and he at least understood his 10%. So the expectations for students to actually understand is what's making it more difficult. So it's no longer okay just to be able to do math. I could do math and get a pretty good mark.
All right, thank you.
So valid, that's a question for the test designers, not for me.
That's great, we'll hold on to that. This is a long one, so I can repeat points as well. I teach grade 6, and we are working through shape and space right now. Many of my students are frustrated because they don't think it's math. We are fortunate to have 1.5 math coaches, and we are working on developing more authentic tasks. Despite talking about its application in video games, sports, construction, and even coding, the kids are struggling to see how it is math. How do you suggest we help our students better understand the definition of mathematics? How can we best help our students develop a growth mindset in mathematics? This is from Kim.
Right up your alley.
It's a good question. Well, mathematics is the science of number and space. So unfortunately, we often just think of mathematics as the science of number, and we forget the space part. So if you look at a lot of even the research that is currently being done in mathematics, you have to really visualize, and that's the visual component component, one of our processes as well, which is something we have to continue to work on with our kids. So mathematics is the science of number and space, so just show that definition to them and do more work on geometry.
And I think that's also like a big question as well. So afterwards, after the event, I'm sure some of our panelists, you're gonna be around if people just want to have some discussions one-on-one. But that was a big question, and it was a really personal one, so thank you for sharing that. This one's from Joan. Do the panel members feel we should have math teachers with that subject as a specialty beginning in elementary school, rather than teachers or generalists? Okay, so we know the audience's opinion on this. What about yours?
Well, I think it's actually about content knowledge and pedagogy together. So I don't think we get to separate those. I think those two, that's the gift of a teacher, is to actually be able to understand the content well enough that you understand how people learn it, and the mistakes that they might make, and the distractions that might come up, and how learning is connected. So in elementary schools, do I think we need teachers who deeply understand mathematical content? Yes, but I think they need to understand how to teach that content.
Well, certainly there's pros and cons to having subject area specialists in elementary school. And the curriculum now across the board is getting more and more complex, making it difficult for teachers to have real strong pedagogical content knowledge in all of those areas. But we have to think about the children that are there before us. So if you choose to go to content specialists, we also know that that changes the feel of an elementary school. So I don't think there's, you have to weigh the pros and cons of going with content specialists or not.
With your statement here, I should have caught this. There was a follow-up question here that matched very well with what you said. Plus, how is post-secondary preparing teachers to teach math? And you might not be able to answer this, but it felt like it followed up. Yeah.
That's neat. So, in elementary school, and this is pretty consistent across Canada, except in Quebec, is that most elementary school teachers or pre-service teachers will take one mathematics course, usually in arithmetic or any other content in mathematics, and one curriculum and instruction course. That's pretty common all across Canada, even a lot of places in the States as well. Secondary, you certainly have a major or minor, 36 credits or 18 credits if you were a junior high, senior high school teacher. In Quebec, it's quite different. There, you could have, they have an interesting merging between mathematics and mathematics education. So they might have up to 8 courses for their elementary and middle years teachers in mathematics and mathematics education combined. I don't know if I answered the question. That's just a...
And I think these are large questions. So once again, like this is the beginning of the conversation, as we had mentioned earlier tonight. There is a hashtag Math Wars, and at the end of the night, I will leave some information on how to stay connected. But this is the beginning of the conversation. And Dan, there's a piece of paper right here in the front. All right, so I love this question. Again, panelist voice disdain for back to basics, but yet, as David said, of course you need to know your times tables. How do these positions connect? Grade 6 students did not perform well on PAT Part A. Questions include 15 times 50. Don't we want students to be able to answer that? And here's a quote. Do or do not. There's no try. Yoda. I think it's like the equivalent of a teacher mic drop right there. Right?
But of course, I mean, yes, Yoda's right. Always right. No, but of course, you want your kids to know 50 times 15. But discovery math doesn't preclude that. So, I don't think so.
Nobody used the term discovery math.
Sorry.
See, nobody used the term discovery math?
The media
Media
A. And so I was talking to some of my teacher colleagues. So questions like 78.03 divided by 9, 7 minus 4.09, 25.7 times 3. So there's 15 questions in 15 minutes. And JC was telling us that he gave that to his teachers and nobody finished in 15 minutes. So these grade 6 students were given this test, not a lot of preparation time. Remember, most of the content they're learning here occurred in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, not necessarily grade 6. And so having to do 15 questions, 15 minutes, threw them off. I think I already heard teachers talking about, well, what would they do the next time? How could they better prepare the students the next time? This is just the first time this test has been run. I don't know if these are good questions or not. Adults certainly couldn't finish the 15 questions in 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I'd just like to point out, so those aren't basic facts.
Right.
Those are actually some pretty deep computational demands. And I don't know if any of you have really had a good look at the grade 9 part A and the sample questions that have been provided for that, but they're very complex. We are talking about multiple embedded order of operations, exponents, like just the look of the questions is going to probably take 15 seconds out of the minute that's available to answer it to actually analyze what the actual questions are. So let's not confuse these with basic facts.
Was that a hand up or a hand stretch?
It's a hand up, but that's not the order of operations for the meeting.
Okay, great. It seemed like there's a
I'll
fault.
write it on a piece of paper.
Teacher's so organized. I love it. And we're trying our best to answer the question. They are. I'm not doing anything. But if there are more questions, we can follow up with them afterwards, and you can get another piece of paper. And we can follow up with it. This has been discussed a little bit, but let's see if there's anything to add to it. It was mentioned that we need to take a moment to pause and see what the cause is of the crisis. So, 1, what additional information do you need to determine gaps? 2, are there any identifiable gaps aside from geometry? So, what additional information do we need to determine gaps, and are there other identifiable gaps?
Well, I can start to talk about that. One of the projects that I'm working on with some school authorities, 5 school authorities in Alberta, Alberta Education, their assessment branch. So we are looking at 3 cohorts of students who wrote the grade 3, the grade 6, and the grade 9 test. So they had to write all 3 tests. Starting 2000, we've got a cohort that started in 2001, another one in 2002 on the older curriculum, and then a new cohort that just finished the grade 9. I believe they did grade 3 in 2008. So what we're really interested in knowing is what will predict grade 9 performance in grade 3 and grade 6. Is it really number, or is it something different? So that's some of the analysis that we're doing. What was interesting and what we've found so far is in the 2001-2002 cohort, it is number that predicts future performance in other strands. But the most recent cohort is different. It's patterns and relations that actually predicts grade 9 number in grade 3. Patterns and relations in grade 3 predicts grade 9 number. So that's the type of analysis we need to do rather than assume we know what the causes are and start fixing them. We need to use some of the data that we have available to find out where students fall off that cliff in grade 6 to grade 9.
So speaking of that cliff that we've been talking about here, this question leads into it perfectly. And if you have anything you want to add, we can go back to the other one, but this led so well. Our local diploma results show that CBE high school students consistently meet or exceed both the provincial acceptable standard and standard of excellence year after year. Why do you believe students fall off the cliff in grade 6 and 9 standardized assessments, but do so well in grade 12? So they fall off the cliff and they climb back up.
So these are actually very different assessments. So in grade 9, we have every student is taking the same math course with a few exceptions. So in when they're in high school though, now there's options for which course they're going to take. Not draw direct connections between those two very different sets of testing protocols isn't actually going to give us a good set of information.
And just remember that to graduate from high school, you don't have to take grade 12 math. So it was, you can finish with grade 11 math. So we've already streamed out a number of those students that struggled as well.
Okay. 3 to 5 years to assess the success of a new strategy is too long, all caps. Almost a third of school. What will be done to direct students back to success? That's the first one. So what will be done to direct students back to success? And the second one is, what ways are CBE intentionally integrating STEM and relevant job skills into students' learning now?
I'm just going to jump in real quick. I think 3 to 5 years, unfortunately, is really, really short. But policy literature is pretty convinced it takes 10 years to know if something really works. So 3 to 5 years is...
What do you do for that kid that's sitting there? Well, you know, what can we do? Like, we know that you need the time to analyze the data, but what can we do for the kids that are being left behind?
Come on!
Homework!
I feel like there's a math fight that's going to break out right now. It's just throwing integers around, but that's a great one. What can be done now?
So I think there's a difference between assessing a large-scale policy or a strategy in a district or in a province and the work that's done for an individual student. So somebody is paying attention to an individual student's learning every single day. They are paying attention, they're assessing, they're teaching, they're trying to do the best for that student. Nobody's waiting 3 to 5 years to help an individual student. So the difference.
And I think there was a second part to it right here. What ways are CBE intentionally integrating STEM and relevant job skills into student learning now?
So STEM. So in high schools, the students are choosing programs and courses. CTS is the Career and Technology Studies is in a lot of cases a STEM-based program of studies, depending on the courses that the students choose. So I think it is happening. The options are there. The dual credit strategy in the province opens up doors to students in these kind of professional capacities every day. So we have students who are pretty active in that work.
And it seems like this is something that has been answered before. If this person wanted more information, where could they go to find out regarding this question right here?
I think if it's about the program of studies, then it's the province, and there's information on the website about that. But I think that's an actual question about an individual student program, and so the actual school that's working with that student would be the best place.
Great. All right, this is another two-parter. Hello, so friendly of them. When you do these average numbers, do you take data from all the CBE schools only, or are there other schools like private, Catholic, and talented kids schools? That's the first one. The second one is there a website / resources center where schools can share their best practices in teaching and can be used by others? So the first one is regards to average numbers. How is that calculated? And is there a resource center where teachers and schools can share best practices?
For the international, I'd have to look at the technical report for Alberta. I imagine, yes, it will include your private and Catholic schools. Normally they do in most sampling frames. Some countries might take out, usually it's if they less than 5% of the population, you're allowed to take them out. But I'd have to look at the technical report for Alberta.
Okay, great. And the second one is there a website or resources where schools can share their best practices in teaching?
So within the Calgary Board of Education, we do have platforms online where teachers do have those opportunities, yes.
Great, thank you. Okay. I'm trying to understand this one. There's 3 questions, but I don't know if this person underlined or scratched out the other questions. So, Chris, if you're here, did you want to ask 3 questions or 1 question and scratch out the other 2? Just one question. Okay, great. Why are averages used and not standard deviations? Wouldn't standard deviation give us a clearer picture?
Well, there is the standard error, which is the standard deviation divided by the square root of n. So that's there. Yeah, and that's fine. And we could talk standard deviations. I didn't because people don't like to talk standard deviations. But if we look at grade 4 mathematics, I'd love to talk about standard deviations. If we saw that you go from 523 to 484, it's about 50 points, and on that scale, it's a half a standard deviation. So if you have a half a standard deviation drop on a test like that, that's a really serious issue, and that's going to go across any kind of errors. But yeah, standard deviations are a fine way to talk. And on the PISA scale, just if for the nerds out there that like this stuff, 500 could be 0 and 1 could be a standard deviation. So if 500 and 100 is a standard deviation away, so 600 would be 1 standard deviation, 400 would be one standard deviation the other way.
I feel like this would be your room, like for people to like that.
Yeah,
kind of
I
stuff,
know.
right?
I like these
There's
people. This is great.
Throughout the discussion so far, sometimes I hear a random person be like, "Yes!" Like you're just cheering, and it's so exciting to hear. All right. As university math for sciences or more sciences, as university math in first year often remains focused on doing rather than understanding, computation of derivatives versus understanding and meaning, what are your thoughts regarding integrating secondary and post-secondary? Higher levels in math require complex problem solving, but often introduction weeder courses are something focused. Did I say words? I don't know what I just said. I don't know. Did anyone ask this? Because I'd like to properly ask this question. So you did, yes. Yeah, sorry. It was like it's the line switch sometimes, and yeah, you crossed out certain words. Yeah.
They're great.
Okay.
Yeah, so often when we're looking at the transition from tutor to both high school and post-secondary mathematics. And what I see when I'm transitioning students from high school to university is that often they're starting to pick up this whole curriculum focus of problem solving, problem solving, problem solving. And then they get into their first year theater courses where 50% of the class is failing. And they're focused on problem solving and they want to understand, but it's a theater course and they just have to get through your comment about getting the 70 versus getting the 10. So my concern is that I see a lot of first-year university students failing when they're brilliant. So how are we preparing our students for that?
Well, I've heard the same issue with what if the grade 3 teacher is really focused on problem solving and the grade 4 teacher is really just doing the worksheets. So we have to make the decision about what is in the best interests of our children. What do we want them to learn? So the teachers in secondary are doing a terrific job if they are teaching the curriculum, helping children understand problem solving. We know that when they go transition to post-secondary, that's a different world. So maybe we need to speak with mathematicians about that.
I have 3 questions, and Dan said wrap it up. But Dan, I'm gonna be a loose cannon here. I think we can get through these 3 questions. Is that cool? We're gonna quickly get through it as best you can. We'll take one answer for each one.
Is this the rapid fire?
This is the rapid fire, as best as these one-page questions can give. All right. Would you consider mathematics as a language rather than a science? I'm an engineer and use math as a language.
Yes.
Yes.
Baller. Nice. This is in regards to comments about being courageous and bringing about change. Is the CBE considering using other textbook-based curriculum, or are teachers still using the same dry Saxon textbooks from 20 years ago? Are alternatives such as graphic novel-based curriculum like Beast Academy under considerations? Interested parent.
There's no quick answer to that one. So There are, Alberta Education has approved resources, recommended resources. They're renewed all the time. I think teachers work really hard to find real-world applications, online problems. I don't think it's dry and dead. I think there's lots going on.
So there are alternatives.
There are lots of alternatives.
And how can this parent find out more about those alternatives?
I always say go talk to the teacher because they're the closest to the action.
Okay. Then you want to
I was just going to say, teachers are professionals, so they are responsible for choosing the resources. I haven't seen a Saxon textbook in the classroom. I don't even know what it is.
That's a musical instrument. All right. Is Cumin a bellwether to students lacking learning in classroom? If Cumin is a successful business, is the classroom failing? Whoa. Where's that Cumin guy? Yeah, there he is. Yeah. He's got like business cards. Cumin, yeah. If Cumin is a successful business, is the classroom failing?
Anytime that children or youth are doing mathematics in school and out of school, they will improve. So whether they're going to Cumin, whether their sister is tutoring them, the neighbor, whether they're doing games online, anytime children are doing mathematics, they will improve. So there just happens to be some big business around tutoring right now.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Give me a round of applause to our panelists today. Thank you for... We had some great questions, and like I said, we're going to continue the conversation. But with a few closing remarks, I want to welcome to the stage the president of the Calgary Public Teachers Association. Please give a warm welcome to Kevin Kemp.
Thank you. So lots of good takeaways for me because I'm not a math teacher. The one time that I was asked to teach math, it went fairly well, but I was a lot like Rana. I could teach kids how to do the math, but because I'm not a mathematician and not a math teacher, I could not teach them why or the understandings behind that. And quite honestly, it got me into a little bit of a trouble. So I was very happy when the principal said, "You're not teaching math next year." So my primary objective for being up here tonight is to thank our panelists and to thank the participants who did the math practice fair prior to the panel. So I'd like to reiterate, thank you very much for participating. Thank you all for coming this evening on Friday the 13th in Calgary, downtown at 5 p.m. just shortly, I was going to say after rush hour, but not really, because I was traveling back and forth in that time frame. So for the panelists, for Lynn, for David, for Rana, we have a very small gift to show our appreciation for you and your contributions to this evening. And also for Andrew.
What?
Now my staff know me very, Dan is one of our staff in the local office, and he knows me very well. So he said, the black ones are for the boys and the white ones are for the girls. And you'll notice that the tissue paper is Calgary Public's colors. So, David.
Thank you very much.
And they even labeled them for me, and I'm not wearing my glasses, so this looks like Rana. Then the other girl. And we're not trying to sex, we're just making it simple. And last but not least,
Oh, thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you.
So, once again, thank you all, and as Andrew mentioned, the panelists will hang around for a little bit if you have some personal questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So that's all the time we have for tonight. Like I said, use the hashtag MathWars on Twitter for more information on Local 38 and the Calgary Public Teachers. Visit local38.teachers.ab.ca. One more time, round of applause for Calgary Public Teachers for putting this on. Thank you so much for coming out, and have a safe and wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.